In the end, $9 billion worth of DOGE cuts were approved by the Senate. These federal funding clawbacks were originally approved by the Department of Energy DOGE and includes cuts to foreign aid and public broadcasting programs. Even though $9 billion were cut, it's really only a small fraction of the cuts that DOGE had actually recommended. Over the course of the night, Democrats tried getting a number of the cuts thrown out because they were not successful. The chamber rejected a measure that would have kept $496 million for international disaster relief and a different measure that would have barred public broadcasting cuts that impact public safety efforts, especially in small towns. Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski has been a staunch supporter of public broadcasting and voted with Democrats to try and block the funding cuts.
There has been probably no issue, no single issue that has drawn out more interest across the state of Alaska than support for public broadcasting.
Hello, Bobby Jones here from MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. What happens when the quietest voices in America are silenced? This week, President Trump signed off on one of the most drastic and deliberate attacks on civic infrastructure we've seen in recent memory: the full defunding of public broadcasting. No more federal dollars for National Public Radio, also known as NPR. No more support for public broadcasting system, also known as PBS. No more grants to local affiliates, rural media, educational programs, or children's television. In a country where misinformation already spreads faster than facts, this is not about a budget line. It's an actual assault on the national information commons. So in this video, I want to break down what this is all about, what was cut, who it affects, and why it matters more than most people think. At the center of the funding attack is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, or CPB. CPB is a nonprofit that receives federal funds and distributes them to NPR, PBS, and over 1,500 local stations across all 50 states, American territories, and tribal lands. In 2024, CPB received about $535 million in federal support. Here is where that money went. First, local television and radio stations, many in rural and underserved areas, many that are found in red states, many of them voted for President Trump. Programming for children like Sesame Street, Arthur, and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Things that are on TV every day, exposing young people to their first educational principles. This also went to educational outreach, especially in low-income school districts. The money also went to emergency alerts and disaster broadcasting infrastructure. That has been in the news very recently due to the floods in Texas, due to the earthquake in Alaska, due to the wildfires in Arizona. Very vital infrastructure. But what else is gone too? Programs like Ready to Learn, which creates literacy-focused TV and online content for preschoolers. Public media interconnection grants, which ensure stations can stay online and share content not just in their community, but across the country. Native and rural broadband grants, which are vital to keep public television and radio alive in places without commercial options. This wasn't about trimming fat. It was about cutting the cord entirely to the most disadvantaged people in America. The first and hardest hit stations will be in rural America. Stations in Montana, Alaska, West Virginia, and the Mississippi Delta operate on shoestring budgets, with over 60% of their funding coming from the CPB. So when federal funding dries up, these stations don't just shrink, they will vanish. No more weather or emergency alerts in those remote areas. No more local journalism in the news deserts that they exist in. No more free access to educational programming for kids without cable or broadband. And tribal communities will also face a devastating loss, as many rely on public radio as their only consistent media outlet. But it doesn't just stop in the rural areas, right? Even in big cities, national programming like Morning Edition, PBS NewsHour, or the award-winning excellent program Frontline is supported in part by federal funding. lose CPB, and the entire public media ecosystem begins to collapse. Even for people who donate, stream, or live in media-rich areas, they'll lose that access. So let's be clear. Public broadcasting is not just about nostalgia. It's infrastructure. It is pivotal, vital, civic, cultural, and informational infrastructure for the United States of America. Additionally, here's what they specifically bring to the table for the American public. Number one, trusted news. According to a 2023 Pew Research study, NPR and PBS are the most trusted media outlets in America across the political spectrum. Number two, it brings educational equity. Public television is the largest classroom in the country, reaching millions of kids with free content proven to improve literacy and emotional development. Three, disaster resilience. Public radio is built to stay on the air during hurricanes, wildfires, and blackouts, often outlasting commercial stations across the country. Four, media diversity. Public broadcasting amplifies Black, Latino, Asian, LGBTQ plus, rural, and indigenous voices far more than commercial media, because commercial media is driven by ratings and ad revenue. Public broadcasting is not. So voices that have been crying and desperately fighting to be heard are able to be heard because there is no price tag attached to their messaging. So this isn't about watching Antique Roadshow, which is a pretty cool show if you watch it. I'm kind of one of those people. It's about who gets heard, who gets helped, and who gets the facts. Now, this isn't the first time the Republicans, especially under President Trump, have gone after public broadcasting. In 1981, President Reagan proposed cutting the CPB entirely. Congress rejected it. In 1995, as part of Newt Gingrich's, contract with America, Newt Gingrich called public broadcasting welfare for rich liberals, and his attempt to zero out the funding ultimately failed. And in Trump's first term, budgets proposed killing the CPB funding in 2017, 2018, and 2019, but Congress refused. So what changed in 2025? This time, Trump aligned the cuts with a broader campaign of political control over the media, part of the attacking fake news narrative. He vilified NPR for his election coverage and painting public broadcasting as a haven for left-wing elitism. It was part of an overarching strategy against, quote, the fake news. He framed the cuts as fiscally responsible, but the CPB accounts for just 0.01% of the federal budget. Let me say that again. 0.01% of the federal budget. So in truth, this was about silencing critics and dismantling independent institutions, many of which are relied upon because they are the only option where these people live. So in truth, here's what we can expect in the following coming months, unfortunately. Dozens of local stations will shut down, especially in red states. Thousands of jobs in journalism, education, and media production will be lost. Rural and tribal communities will lose their primary emergency communication lifelines. More kids will be funneled into low-quality, ad-driven content instead of evidence-based learning media. Disinformation and media polarization will accelerate, especially in places without credible local reporting. And what is the biggest consequence? Well, the biggest consequence is this. The American public will lose one of its last non-commercial, non-partisan tools for civic engagement. So now what? What do we do now that this is happening? Well, if you value fact-based reporting, if you believe rural and urban kids deserve equal access to education, if you think emergencies shouldn't depend on market share regarding the response, and if you believe in a functional democracy that has a public square to hear and debate and talk about facts, then this should terrify you. Public broadcasting isn't perfect, but it's essential. So what you can do is contact your local congressional representative. They are the ones that ultimately control the purse strings on funding. They had already passed funding for the CPB, and Trump is having them rescind it. Call them, tell them to stop, because once these airwaves go silent, only the loudest and richest voices will remain. And to me, that's not America. Until next time, stay anchored and stay sharp.
New Meidas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.meidastouch.com.